Hi everyone, welcome back to the Neotys Kitchen TV. Today we are live at the Brothwood Castle from the PAC, and it's a very special session because I am gonna cook something very nice with the help of Andreas Grabner. So nice. First of all, thank you Andreas to be here.
Yeah, thank you. It's a special setting, really. Like in a kitchen in a castle. What else do we want, right?
Yeah, really nice kitchen. So thanks you first of all for Brothwood Castle to allow us to record here. So that is awesome. And so what we're gonna cook? Very simply, here we have a traditional kitchen, but we want to do it really nice cooking with AI. So it's going to be using a robot to cook something really nice, and the robot will be Dynatrace. So the idea of here, this session, is to show the efficiency of using Dynatrace during load testing. So there will be a couple of things, and I think before we get there, it will be really important that we remind ourselves what are the requirements to use Dynatrace during load testing. So Andy, could you just remind us what are the main requirements?
So, first of all, I think we did a little session a little earlier, right, this month. But what are the ingredients? I think what we need is the one agent. So you install Dynatrace on your system. Other than that, the one agent and the AI takes care of collecting the data and analyzing the data. But if we are running tests, we want to obviously build and enable the integration with load testing tools. So we have the ability to put HTTP headers on the request.
So the request attributes?
Request attributes. So Dynatrace can actually detect, hey, these requests are coming in from this particular test script, from this particular virtual user, from this particular geographical location, right? The other thing is Neotys load testing tools can send data to Dynatrace. So Dynatrace additionally knows how much load is actually currently coming from the tool, any other metrics from the load testing tool itself. And then the third thing, so sending data to it via the time series API. But then we have a third option where we can actually pull data live from Dynatrace into the load testing tool, again, through our Dynatrace REST API. So you install the one agent, we have the request attributes, and we have REST APIs to push and pull data.
So a couple of things is the integration is available on GitHub. So you can go in the GitHub Neotys Labs GitHub account, you will find it. A couple of requirements from our side, of course, NeoLoad. Second one is NeoLoad Web, because we will be using NeoLoad Web to push the data to Dynatrace. And one thing you didn't mention is Dynatrace has really cool features, is tagging the services and the hosts, and the integration is using tags. So we also explain you during the session how, if you don't have tags defined in your Dynatrace instances, how you can define those tags.
Yeah. And actually, there's one more thing. What's the most challenging thing of actually analyzing load testing data later on? It is actually having the smarts in here to actually understand the data that you collect from the application, and we build this into the AI.
Yeah.
So the Dynatrace AI at the end of the load test, like we did, right, when we break something with load, Dynatrace actually tells you, here's the problem, here's the root cause, go fix it, right? So we automate the whole root cause analysis process thanks to the AI and all the data we have.
And also we will probably show you how to make a load testing dashboard based on a couple of services, a couple of load testing metrics. So then you will definitely from that dashboard see in Dynatrace your load testing metric, but also where are the problems, how are your services behaving, and you will save time during your analysis.
Yeah. And the last thing to mention, it's good to do it once. It's good to do it multiple times and automate everything. So everything we just said can be done one-off or fully automated in a CI/CD pipeline, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what it's all about. Right?
All right, so let's keep tuned, and so we'll have three steps here. First, we'll see everything in NeoLoad, how you install the plugin, how you which are the different parameters required to enable these integrations. And second step would be in Dynatrace, so about how you define the request attributes. In fact, we will explain, we are using the appmon taggings that from NeoLoad that is sent by NeoLoad, so we will define how you configure those tagging in Dynatrace. Then we will also see you to set the tags in Dynatrace, and then of course how to make a dashboard. And then you will see the beauty of it and the output of that. So we'll save time again and take advantage of the AI. As to start, of course, to make this integration, you need a plugin. If you want to make this happen and take advantage of the integration, you need obviously to download our plugin. So for those who doesn't know, Neotys has Neotys Lab, everything that is built through the Kitchen TV or other opportunities. We push it on our GitHub account. So you can follow the githubaccount.com, of course. And the account that you should follow is Neotys, Neotys -labs with the S. And if you want to look at the Dynatrace integration, you will look at the /Dynatrace and you will see everything. So if you go to the /Dynatrace, you have a description of the actions, the different parameters, and so on that is required by the integration. So let's click on the latest release here so we can download the different binaries. So here the one that we are interested in is the two jar files. One is called Dynatrace Events and the second one is Dynatrace Monitoring. So those two needs to be downloaded. Once it's been downloaded, we need to place them in specific folders, and I will explain. You have two options for that. There is the first one has a plugin, has a custom actions. You can either link it to your NeoLoad installation, or you can link it to your NeoLoad project as well. So why do I need to link it to a NeoLoad project? Simply because I would probably share my project with other colleagues. I will probably run it in the cloud instance. I need several things that make your project to be shared between different people. So linking the custom actions within a project make your those plugins available for everyone if you're using them specially for that project. So let's see first where you place them if you want to make those plugins available directly in NeoLoad. So you have to go to the NeoLoad installation folder. So in my case, it's C/program files, so NeoLoad 6.2. And I got a folder called xlib, and this is where all our integration are available. This is where you have to place your integrations. And you can see that we have those two jar files are here. Dynatrace Events and Monitoring are in this folder already. But now let's see where you should place those plugins if you want to share it within your project. So we're going to go to the project folder. So here it's going to be in the projects. I'm going to go to Dynatrace Perf Clinic. And here you will find in the project folder that's the standard NeoLoad project. There's nothing special about it. It's just we have a lib folder. And with that lib folder, you can see that we have an xlib folder. And this is where you're going to place your custom actions. Once you have placed them, you will need to restart NeoLoad. So here my NeoLoad is already restarted. And if you want to see those actions, you will be able to see them in the logical action tree view. If you scroll down, you will see that we have the advanced sections. And this is where you will find all our custom actions. And you can see now, because you have restarted and you have added those actions, you have an APM folder. And in that APM folder, you see the Dynatrace folder, and you will see the events and monitoring actions. So now let's see how to use these actions within NeoLoad. So first of all, one important aspect, you need to create a dedicated user path for the actions. So here in my case, I named that user path Dynatrace. And if I expand that actions, you will find the standard three containers or logical actions that we have. So init, actions, and end. And if I expand those, you will see that I have placed the Dynatrace monitoring in the action block and the Dynatrace events in the end block. So why do we have this? Because monitoring, the main idea of the monitoring action is to extract KPIs from Dynatrace and send it back to NeoLoad. And in parallel, extract NeoLoad KPI and send it to Dynatrace. So this is what you want to do. You want to iterate this during your tests to grab information and send information back and forth between Dynatrace and NeoLoad. Last is the events. Events, I will position this in the end block. Why? Because I want to alert Dynatrace that the test has been finished. And I want to send events
in all the services used by the applications. So then you will see that later. Andy will explain it. You will be able to filter and compare by custom events. And this is what we're doing. We're sending in events, and we are linking all the information related to the tests, the project name, the scenario name, the test name, blah, 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 blah. So let's see the different parameters. But if we go with there, one important aspect is that our integration requires to have a NeoLoad subscription. So if you're a free user, don't worry, you'll have a couple of hours of free in our Dynatrace in NeoLoad Web. So here I'm connected in NeoLoad Web already with my NeoLoad Web account, so I can see my different users, my different tests, sorry. And to take advantage of the integration, you need to have a token. So where do I get a token? Simply by going to my user account settings. So here I'm going to click on it, and you have a folder called a tab called Access Token, and this is the one that you're going to copy and paste it in the settings of NeoLoad. So I'm going to go back to NeoLoad, and you will see that in the preferences of NeoLoad, you have a section for NeoLoad Web, and this is where you're going to place the token. Of course, you have to enable NeoLoad Web to transfer the data to NeoLoad Web, and we will have to add that your token there. One thing important, so that's for sure is one of the mandatory steps to make that integration possible. Second thing, once you have defined actions and monitoring in the action again, I say it again, and in the end block, you have to place a pacing. Why? Because we are utilizing API of Dynatrace, and they are limiting the number of calls, of course, to avoid to be blasted by users. So here, don't forget to place a pacing, because otherwise you'll be blocked by Dynatrace. So the minimum pacing is 30 seconds. So I would definitely recommend to put 30 seconds in minimum here in the action block. All right, so now let's see the different parameters required for these integrations. So first of all, you need to link your Dynatrace account. So if you're using the Dynatrace SaaS environment, part of your URL has the account ID. So here, this is exactly what I'm seeing. You can see that I'm not pushing the URL, I'm pushing only the Dynatrace account to the Dynatrace ID parameter. Second thing, you need a Dynatrace API key. Andy will explain how to extract it and how to generate it. So that is, of course, mandatory. And last, if you're not using the SaaS, but you are a managed server customer of Dynatrace, then there is a second parameter, which is optional, of course, to the managed server instances. You need to place the host name. So you remove the HTTPS and you take the rest of the URL, and you will place that in this parameter. Second thing is tags. You will see also tags is required. So either you already have tags that has been extracted by Dynatrace. If you don't have, create them manually. Why? Because we will extract information based on the tags, and we will send events to the tags as well. So if you don't have tags, then this integration won't work. So please create tags. It's more than required. And then, of course, you have the API host, API port of NeoLoad. Why do we have this? Because we want to send back metrics from Dynatrace to NeoLoad. So by default, you will find localhost. But if you're planning to run this user called Dynatrace, in my case, in a separate load generator, I would recommend to put the public IP address of your controller. So that's typically the parameters required in NeoLoad. And the last thing that you should not forget about is to add or ask NeoLoad to place the Dynatrace headers in the traffic. And here, this is possible by going in the preferences of NeoLoad. In the project settings, you will click on the all Dynatrace integrations, and you have here enable Dynatrace information. So you will have to enable this, and from that moment you do that, NeoLoad is adding headers informations to the traffic. So let's run, let's say, this user. I'm going to press start checking. NeoLoad will run the scenario to Dynatrace. But what I'm interested in here is I'm not interested to the results of the use case here, obviously. What I want to show you here is the headers that we're sending. So if you click on one of the requests here and that has been run, and I click on the request details, you can see that those information is added by default because I have enabled the Dynatrace information. So there are a few things that we will see with Andy, how to configure Dynatrace to recognize the information that we're sending. I would definitely recommend to limit the information to the SI information, the SN will be the name of your user. So you can see here it's the Easy Travel Search and Booking. You can see it here. And the last, of course, is the container name, transaction name. So NA will be the transaction name. And if you're planning to generate the load from the cloud, take advantage of that by using also GR. GR is very important. So Andy will explain where you have to place them, and so you could have your Dynatrace instance pre-configured for your test. One small thing before I leave it to Andy, we need to configure a population because population is required for the test setting. So here I have a population for my test, fun load, and so on. And I have one dedicated population for the Dynatrace user. So one population with the Dynatrace virtual user path that I've just built. And so that will be required. And once you have done that, you can go to this runtime settings where you have your test configured. And don't worry, don't forget about it. You need to select all the populations, including the Dynatrace integrations. And the Dynatrace integration would be in terms of load the constant load policy with one single user, and you will run this Dynatrace integration during the entire duration of your tests. So if you're planning to run a 3 hours test, don't forget to put 3 hours as well here. So that's typically it for NeoLoad. So now let's see how you configure Dynatrace.
All right. So let's see the settings that is required in Dynatrace directly. So we've seen NeoLoad. So we just seen the headers that NeoLoad will send to Dynatrace in terms of request attributes. So Andy, could you explain us where you configure those informations?
Sure. Yeah, happy to do so. So basically every request that comes in from NeoLoad will be tagged with this header. And what we can do if we go to settings, so in the Dynatrace menu here, settings, and then you go to server-side monitoring, we have a section that's called request attributes. So the idea here is that we can tell Dynatrace, hey, every request that you see, please pick out individual pieces on that request end to end, and then basically apply it as a tag to that request. And we call this request attributes. So I've already configured 3 of them. I mean, you've seen the header. I think the most important one is the NA part. So the header, as you know, is the name value pairs. And basically what I've done here, I've created one where I said, hey, Dynatrace, look at every request that comes in. You give it a name. I just called it load testing NA. Then I said, well, the first occurrence, meaning the first time when we see it on a request, I want to have the original text. We could have here things like we could convert it to upper and lowercase, but we keep it original. And then if you would say confidential data, which obviously it's not, but this allows you to actually say, well, block this data value actually later on for people that don't have access to confidential data. The more important thing now is really the data source. So you can add a new data source. In my case, I already added it to it. And what I basically say, hey, Dynatrace, look at the HTTP request and then look at the parameter x-dynatrace. And for that x-dynatrace, I want you to parse out the value between NA equals and the following semicolon, right? That's basically what we do. And additionally, what I've also done just as a precaution, don't look at requests where the same x-dynatrace header is used that starts with an FW. Now, why is that? We also provide end-to-end monitoring also from mobile devices and from some other devices. And if they also are injected with Dynatrace agent, they use the same HTTP header. So I just want to make sure we're not looking at these requests. So all the requests that start with FW, forget about them, but everything else, if there's an x-dynatrace header on the wire, then please parse it out and parse out the value that is between NA and the semicolon. Now, with me, right, I'm more comfortable with this. You could also specify a regular expression, but I think this is actually the best way of doing it from my perspective. So I did it for NA, and I also did it if I go back with the other parameters. SI, same thing, and also SN.
And just one small questions. So
Mhm,
you define it 3 different request attribute rules.
mhm.
Why don't you configure directly the data source, saying, okay, I got this x minus Dynatrace parameter and have three data source through
So
NA in the
yeah,
same
the
rule.
reason So the reason is request attributes is a concept that is very generic, right? We use it now for load testing integrations, but in general, I could come up with a very generic rule where I can say pick up the search query, right? And I can say, hey, Dynatrace, please, I want you to pick up a search query. Well, so where does the search query come? So I can add a data source, and I can say, well, look at the search query on a process level, on a service level, on only for particular groups, and then also pick it from either of these here, right? It could actually be an HTTP parameter, a request header. It can also be a method argument or a return value. So there's a lot of different options here where we can use request attributes for. And so the reason why I decided to do it that way, as you asked, is because you are sending multiple data points, right? They are kind of put into this HTTP header, and I say pick individual pieces of this string that is passed as an HTTP header, and then later make it available as individual tags. So we will see requests that are being tagged with the value that are extracted by these rules.
Okay, so I get the idea. And then, for example, I am a customer that has an application with some JSON payloads, and yeah, as I've seen, you can check out the post and get parameters as well. So let's say
Exactly.
I want to track specific, let's say, calls that is referring to that payload. So can I combine, though I guess it's possible because you have the ability to do so, combine those 3 rules that you just mentioned, and then I want extra rules more for tracking those
Yeah.
specific content.
Yeah.
And how would that rules will be applied? Is there a specific order in terms of the first one will be the first, so first
No,
in,
all
first
of them,
out?
all of them will be applied. But the key thing here is, right? If I say, as you said here, we could, for instance, say search key or search field, right? If you have a website where you can search, you can say Dynatrace. I want you to know if requests come in from the load testing tool. We have these rules, but then I can additionally say, hey, Dynatrace, I can say for certain of my processes, right, I can actually here be very specific on where these rules should be applied. In my previous rules that I created, I kept all of these blank. That means for every single request that comes in on any process, on any service, the rules will be evaluated. But I can narrow it down. I can say, you know what, I only wanna do it on, let's say, certain spaces, right? I have a prod space or I have a pre-prod space. So only for services that run in my pre-prod space, or only for applications that are running Apache or Java. So I can narrow down the scope of that rule set by defining these tags and say only evaluate there. There's no ordering, but I can narrow down the scope.
So I guess if you're using Dynatrace with to monitor your production pre-prod and you want just have those request attributes for your pre-production, then the that just you mentioned the by filtering by the tags will be the most efficient one because that would
Exactly.
allow us to avoid having those tags be applied for every traffic that goes in Dynatrace.
Exactly. That's the idea.
So great, that's wonderful. So the second thing that we've seen in NeoLoad's integrations, we require to have the API token. Could you just remind us where we can find this token, or if it's not there, how you generate that token?
Sure. So again, we are starting in settings, and in settings we have a section called integration. And on integration, you can actually see there's a tab called Dynatrace API. And the Dynatrace API is really the token that we can generate, and this token can then be used by external tools to make calls to the REST API, just as NeoLoad is doing. So I would assume in a fresh installation there's no token available, so you click on generate token, you give it a name for my load testing tool, and then I think what you want to do is you want to keep these two on, access problem, event notification, metrics, and topology, and also configuration. That's fine. You generate it, and that's it. So now I have my new key token here, right? You expand it, and this is now your token. So this is the token that you need to pass over to the load testing tool. And the cool thing with the token approach is, in case the token gets into the wrong hands, or in case you don't want people to have access to it anymore, you basically just delete the token or disable it, right? But this is the way to get the token.
Okay. So one thing that, I mean, we're not going to show it, but the custom action that we use requires to get your Dynatrace customer ID, which is one part of the URL. So there's two differences to use it, just to remind. So either you use the Dynatrace account ID, so the first piece of your live URL that you can see here. This is the account ID. And if it's a managed environment, then you just simply copy paste the entire URL in the managed service parameter of NeoLoad.
I can show you a managed environment. Thanks for bringing that up. So here I have a managed environment, and basically the managed environment is the full URL here, and then basically all the way down. So that says this is my server, and this is then my environment ID. But for a Dynatrace SaaS environment, that means where Dynatrace actually hosts Dynatrace in the cloud, your URL, here we go, looks like this, right? This is what you need.
Exactly. So don't forget about this information if you need to use the integration. So now we have most of the requirements, and I think we are almost ready to use NeoLoad for that. But I remember when we did the perf clinic that you configured, you had a couple of some tricks and tip and tricks about to configure things in Dynatrace to make the informations more visible and easier to interpret your results. Do you have any things that you would recommend to the performance engineers?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I love about Dynatrace, and I believe most of your customers there, we're testing a lot of monolithic applications, right? Big black boxes, and Dynatrace will see these big, these black boxes. But what we can also do is we can do what we call custom service detection. So instead of seeing a monolith as one monolith where calls come in and then calls go out, and obviously seeing which code gets executed there, we can actually define, I call them virtual service boundaries. So we can actually configure, again, under settings, server-side monitoring, under custom service detection, we can actually define individual Java or .NET methods and saying if this method gets called, it is actually kind of like a service, even though it lives within a monolith, but it is kind of like a service. And the reason why I want to have this is because once we define these services, and let me just show you, there are some that I've defined for a particular class and for a particular method. So if I want to create a new one, just to show you how this works, so you go to custom service detection, you can say for, again, Java, define Java service, give it a name, my, let's say, business layer or business service, right, whatever you want to call it. And then you can either, if you know the method, you can define it manually, or you can also find the entry point, which means you can go through the wizard where Dynatrace first shows you, hey, these are all the Java processes that we've seen, so which one are you actually interested in? So maybe we use the Easy Travel backend, then continue, and then you can actually, if your developers tell you a little bit more about your code structure, maybe there's something about authentication. I'm just making things up here, but I can basically search for all the classes and interfaces that are loaded in that particular app or process that I've selected. So there seems to be an authentication service, right? I can select it, continue, and then also I get the full list of methods, right? I can see every single method that is exposed, and maybe we want to treat a certain method as like a logical service. For instance, I could say every time when authenticate tenant gets called, then Dynatrace, please show this as a service with even though it is within a big monolith. And once I've configured all of this, Dynatrace, maybe I should not call it my business service, but maybe my tenant service, because I just selected that method. Save. Once I have these rules defined, what's really cool, all of these services will show up as individual services. So just to remind you, I had a couple of others configured in our last session, like the generic data access, easy travel recommendation, find journey. So let me actually go to the, I think the recommendation. All of these services will also show up here. So if I click on transaction and services, here's actually the full list of services that Dynatrace automatically extracts for me. These are the ones we automatically detect, but also those that we detect based on the, and for instance, here's the generic data access. So I can click on this guy. So this is actually now a service that runs within a monolith, but we told Dynatrace, please look at this particular code on its own. So we automatically get baselining for it. But what's really cool, and this is what I love about it, I can actually analyze who is calling it. So I can click on Analyze Backtrace, which means, hey, who is actually calling this service? Journey service is calling it, and journey service itself is called by data provider and recommendation. And then I can pick any of these other services, let's say easy travel recommendation, and I can now kind of flip the whole thing, and I can say, well, you know what, I would actually like to see from easy travel recommendation, which is another service, who is it calling and how is the complete end-to-end service look like. So if I do this, what we now see is actually calls that go through your system, and instead of having just one big black monolithic box, we have the ability to draw virtual lines. And you can see here, easy travel recommendation. Let me see if I click on infrastructure on the right, this runs in the front end. This also runs in the front end. So this all runs in the same 1, 2, 3, 4. They all run in the same monolithic Tomcat application, but we drew virtual lines. So that allows us actually to understand how our individual components within a monolith acting and reacting and who is calling whom. And the reason for that exercise is because I believe a lot of companies are now trying to break the monolith into smaller pieces. The reason of this exercise is where are my smart boundaries or seams as they are called that I can use to break off certain components into real services in the future that run on a container, that run in a microservice. But the cool thing is I don't need to change any code. I can use Dynatrace to draw these virtual lines, run my load tests against it, figure out which component is behaving how are the call patterns, and then really make a decision or give recommendation as a performance engineer and saying, you know what, I don't think we should extract this component because it is very tightly connected to another one, so they should belong together. But then we have some services that make sense. Also, a component may have a more CPU and memory consumption than another one, so breaking it apart actually makes sense that one part of the code base does not consume all the memory and CPU, so you're extracting it. So I really like this type of feature. Hopefully this makes sense.
Yeah, and I think it's give you a better understanding where you're spending time, and I think with the help of service flow, which is you just showing now, is I mean it's better than have just three boxes. Just having this explain you exactly where you're spending your time, and that's really really useful. So by the way, you mentioned service flows, request attributes. One thing I just forgot about is the tags. So because the custom action requires tags, and I guess Dynatrace is able to retrieve tags automatically from the environment, but if there is no tags, you can still define them manually. So could you explain that?
Sure. So I think I want to talk about two things actually. First of all, let me start with the tags that are defined, right? The tags that you as Neotys is actually pushing on the request. And if I go back to transactions and services, And if I scroll down, you can see here all the tags that we automatically detected. So whenever we see a service, we put a tag on it based on metadata. So for instance, we know this is a service that is used by another application. It's only background. It is an entry point to an application. What type of service is it? Is it a web service? Is it a web request service, a custom? What type of technology is it? Then on the bottom here, these are the tags, what you mentioned with how can I tag services based on their environment they're in, whether it's prod or staging or anything else. It could be any type of environment. And what we also have here is our request attributes, right? Our load testing NASISN. So I can click on it, and then Dynatrace automatically filters. That means it shows me now only those services where we see requests that have this particular tag, and it seems it's the you were testing in the prod environment against Easy Travel Customer Frontend, so I can click on it. So now I am actually on this particular service, right? If I expand the properties here, we can see that it was additionally tagged with, it comes from org acme and it's the prod space. We are extracting this from metadata that we get from the environment, and I'll show you that in a second. But what I also want to show you, and this is I think interesting for your users, where do all these requests show up based on the tag that you put on the request? And they actually show up if I click on View Dynamic Requests. Here I can now see, hey, what actually happened over the last, let's say 2 hours. I believe you actually ran a test about an hour ago, I think in this time frame. So let me actually analyze, let's say 30 minutes. So I'm clicking in, I have the analysis range. And if I click into that time frame and I scroll all the way down, I see two things. I see top requests, where I see requests by endpoint, by URL endpoint or REST endpoint. And you can already see that some of these also have tags on it. That means, hey, Dynatrace saw requests to this particular URL, but we also automatically extract data from these tags that we defined. But if I click on request attributes, this kind of pivots the view around. So here now I can look at all the requests that came in from, let's say, Neotys that were tagged, and then I can say, well, let's analyze all the tags that came in with NA. Just click NA, so I can expand it, and now I can see, hey, I had several requests that came in with this particular script name, with this script name, with this script name, with this. I can see the response time. I can click on one, so let's click on the search set date, which was one of your test scripts. So now what I'm doing, you can see here I'm filtering, again, by tags. I can say Dynatrace, only show me response time, failure rate, CPU, or throughput for those requests that came in through a tool that actually put the tag, the load testing NA tag on it. And in my case, because I clicked on a particular instance, I'm additionally filtering it for the search date. I could even go further and I can say, only show me those where, let's say, the HTTP method was a GET or a POST. So I can do a lot of cool things here. I can do multidimensional filtering and then really focus on particular requests that I'm interested in.
And moreover, I think from here, for people that was used to use Appman and love the pure path, they can take advantage as well here in this screen.
Yeah, exactly. So I am kind of focusing on these particular requests that came in from this particular test script. I have the analysis range set here for that time frame. You can go directly to PurePath from here. If you want to start a level higher, just show me the hotspots or the method hotspots. But if you want to, obviously, you can directly go to the pure paths. So now I'm seeing all these pure paths that we captured, and maybe you want to sort by response time, so I have the slowest on the top, expand it, and then again we can leverage the fact that Dynatrace has an automatic built-in response time hotspot detection. So I can click on that, and then Dynatrace tells me where the time is slow, and it tells me it was all code execution, right? And it actually called so this particular method here. But if I want to, as you said earlier, I can always go to the pure path. So view pure path, here's the pure path, analyze it, and here we go. Here's the full end-to-end pure path that people so dearly love, starting from this Tomcat and then making its way through different, wow, so a lot of services actually. This seems to be a very a very extensive one. So it would actually also be interesting if I go back to this view here to also say, no, show me the service flow for individual pure paths. So all of this is possible, right? This is pretty cool stuff. So we can do a lot of analysis yeah, and take it from there.
Right. Perfect. And so we've seen here how to see the traffic that we're generating with the tags that we've added. So taking advantage of PurePath, service flow, do the analysis. Everything could be done there. One thing also is the metrics that we are sending. So NeoLoad with the new integration is pushing metrics to Dynatrace. So where can I find those metrics?
Yeah, so all the metrics can be charted. I mean, some of the metrics, as you said here, the stuff that we capture on our side, some of them are shown in these nice out-of-the-box dashboards. But in your case, we can always say create custom chart, and then we have a full list of all the metrics that we have available. Nice thing is we can just type in Neo, and then we can see your measures. Anything that you want me to chart?
User load,
Anything
for example. Let's say the user load.
User load.
Here, so
Yeah, so
we're
like
limiting, we're pushing to Dynatrace only the metrics that, the information that Dynatrace doesn't have. Obviously, we doesn't want to send everything, so we're limiting the user load, the hit per seconds, the throughputs, and so on. So if you click on the NeoLoad data, you would be able to see all the different metrics that is sent by NeoLoad.
Exactly.
So here you will see all the lists of the metrics. So from there, I think from there it could be very easy to select the information that you want to graph or build a sort of a dedicated dashboard for load testing, I guess. How do you do that?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, the cool thing is, well, first of all, this is a nice overview of external tools that send us data on all the metrics, right? Like if I go back what we did earlier, coming back to the charting. So let's do user load, right? That's what was interesting. So you said user load. You want to know how much load you actually push through the system. You can add multiple metrics. But let's take this one. And we say we want to use this in a dashboard, so we pin it to a dashboard. In this case, actually, it was added to a dashboard you already built because this was my default dashboard, and it was added to it. User load. You can also obviously create new dashboards. If I click on dashboards, create a new one. I call this my load testing dashboard. Create. So it starts with an empty dashboard. We add a tile, and it would be the same thing as before. I may want to start with a custom chart, right? Same thing, right? I come to the same wizard, user load. That would be nice. Build the chart and then pin to the dashboard where we just started. And then what I can also do, I mean, I think one of the reasons why we push, you push NeoLoad data to Dynatrace is because you want to combine it with some other data that you're interested in. So we could either say, well, we want to add a new tile that actually shows some of the other data that Dynatrace has. So for instance, how are my databases doing? I could put in the database health tile, or I can focus on one particular database and see how the performance is. So whatever I want, I can use this, right? So I'm adding basically, and I'm combining load testing metrics with data that Dynatrace sees. That's a nice thing. Another thing that I like a lot, if I have this dashboard, and let's go back to my my transactions and services. Remember, this was where we started, and I have a lot of services. They run in prod and pre-prod. My easy way to find my stuff is just filter by the tag. So this is this guy here. So now what I can do, I can click on also charts here, and this would now, because I only run tests against one instance of the whole thing, I can take this, let's say request count that actually is a request that actually end up on that service, and again pin to dashboard. So it's another way of getting data into the dashboard. It's like a convenient way of starting on one point and then pinning something to the dashboard. And there's multiple ways. If I go again back into one of my services, like here, We also just introduced this here, where you can actually create multi-dimensional views. Again, coming back to the charts, where right from here you can say, well, this is a service that is interesting for me, so I want to see, for instance, total CPU time of that particular service, and then split by, in this case, the series, which is the URL, because we're looking at a service. So I can do this as well, and what I can actually do, I can save this to the service, which means it doesn't show up in the chart, but it's kind of like a custom chart that I have accessible from here, right? So in here, custom configure chart, I always get in here. So that's another nice thing. And I believe, what else can I tell you? Oh yeah, this is another one. If this is a service, obviously we're testing against, and you want to have high level overview of this service in your dashboard, click on the three dots, and then again, pin to dashboard, and it will pin it to the dashboard. So now I have your NeoLoad load, I have database health, I have my requests that get in on that particular service that gets load testing data, and then also I have an overview of this service in general. And if I click on it, the click actually brings me to that details view of that service.
Well, so also one thing I wanted to mention is on the data that we are pushing. If you go to the NeoLoad data, if you want to jump back to NeoLoad dashboards directly, if you things that I don't know, the information that you want to extract from NeoLoad, you can click on Show Details, and if you have already a NeoLoad web session opened, you can log in. You will go directly to so it's Neotys SaaS, my account. You will jump directly to the test that is related to that data. So which is allows you to jump back and forth between NeoLoad and Dynatrace in one click. So that's really convenient as well. One thing that you didn't mention, Andy, and I think from a dashboard perspective, what I really loved when I created my dashboard is to add the chart with the problems, because it's always what I really love with Dynatrace is the AI that you have built on top of that. So having the problems and be alerted that you have the problems and let Dynatrace guide you in the analysis is just it's just an awesome feature.
Yeah, thanks for that. So as you mentioned, right, what we have here is the ability. I mean, there's a lot of tiles, obviously, as you can see here, that we have, and I think it's probably under others, yeah, problems. So I click on this, and hopefully this number will always say 0, because 0 means we have no issues at all. Now, you just ran the load test, but only for a couple of minutes, so we didn't really get our application into too much stress. But let me actually see if I click on problems, and if I go back to, I'm not sure when we did the last load test actually.
It was in October, about 11th of October, 12th of October.
Yeah. So let's go back to that time frame maybe. Let's go back to not December. Let's pick the time frame October to something end of October. Apply. Then I believe what we've done actually, one of these actually was the we caused big issues thanks to the load that we generated, and every time the application is really under stress and something fails, then Dynatrace actually opens up these problem tickets. And what actually happens is when we have a problem ticket, well, on the dashboard that you said that you put on, it will say a number, and then you can click on it, and then it automatically gets you to the problem details, which in this case, I believe this is probably when the load test ran, we had easy travel customer front end really experiencing 100% failure rate, or failure rate increased by 100%, especially on the Orange Booking Review, which is the application that we are testing, a very critical one. And what not only do we know that there's a problem, but we also directly see the root cause. The root cause was high garbage collection on some of the Tomcat processes, resulting in that the process actually became unavailable because the underlying Diego cell
which is actually the terminology for Cloud Foundry that we use here. So we're running this stuff on Cloud Foundry, actually shut down because of too much load. We can see what else is happening here. The Linux machine completely exceeded CPU saturation, and what's also really nice, we can see fully how the problem evolved over time. So here's kind of like I like to call it the time-lapse view. So I can replay now what Dynatrace actually observed over time and how the problem actually trickled. And it seems it started with some garbage collection issues on the two Tomcats, and then it trickled through the whole system. You can actually see how all the systems are interconnected. And fortunately, at some point in time, the system kind of healed itself, I guess when load dropped or somebody restarted the services. But this is a really cool view. And not only do we have the time lapse and how the problem started, but as I said earlier, we have the full details on root cause. So I can click on this particular link now, and then we can go back in time and we can actually see what was the Tomcat back then. I mean, this process is no longer running. It was like 2 months ago, but we still have the details about that Tomcat. We still have the JVM metrics in a kind of aggregated environment now, or aggregated time frame, because the older the data, at some point we age the data. Otherwise, if it would be more recent, you would see it down to 10 seconds granularity. But this is really cool, right? And I think this is, Henrik, what you said, what you love about Dynatrace.
And if you keep on that screen,
Yeah, sure.
you can see that there was a couple events, and if you expand those events, we should have, we can, no, okay, that's not a good example. But normally, NeoLoad is pushing also events to the services used by the application. So if I think you mentioned that you would be able to filter by events afterward. So here we are pushing events. So every services that is used by Dynatrace by an application will be have that event. That the starting time and the stop time of the tests, the scenario, the project, all the details related to that specific test, in fact.
Exactly. It would show up here on the event section. As you said, what we're working on right now is if you want to compare different tests or different time frames, you can actually do this. And so if I'm going into my service again, there's a compare option. And right now I would basically take this analysis range here, right? And if I click on compare, then I can compare it with either a custom time frame or some pre-configured ones. And very soon we also have the option to then select here exactly the names of events of load tests, for instance, that you told us. And then we can say, I want to compare this particular time frame with the load test from yesterday or from last week. And it will just show up here in a nice, meaningful name.
That is really useful. That is awesome. All right, I think we explained most of the thing that is required for the integration in Dynatrace. You explained it very precisely how to build a dashboard and analyze and take advantage of problems. So I think that's quite. I think everyone is almost ready to take advantage of that. Do you have any other details that you would like to add, Andy?
No, I think I just want to make sure that I believe most of us in the performance engineering business, we used to do performance engineering in a certain way, running tests very often against very static and predictable environments where we knew which kind of dashboards we could build because we knew how many JVMs we had and what to look for. And I believe that world is simply just changing, especially when you move to the cloud. Concepts as tagging services are mandatory. Also, automatic support for container technologies and PaaS technologies is important. So that's why the combination of a world-class load testing tool with a world-class APM solution like Dynatrace, I believe, is the future. And I believe there's so much data, so we can no longer just rely on our experience to analyze all the data. That's why I believe, just as you, that the problem analytics that we put in with our AI and the problem detection is the way to go, right? I believe that's important to understand.
So now we've been configuring everything. You've seen how to build a dashboard, in Dynatrace, how to configure Dynatrace, and so either you do all the analysis there, either you can jump it in NeoLoad Web to do the analysis from NeoLoad Web. But if you're a big fan of the old NeoLoad UI, then you can still also look at Dynatrace metrics. And as explained before, because we are extracting metrics from Dynatrace only on the infrastructure and services level, and we are sending them to our data exchange API. So this is why you have the host name and the port of your controller to be configured in the plugin. So all those informations, you will be able to see them in live. So here I'm not running a test, but if I would, in the runtime graph, you have a section called external graphs. And this also is available in the results. Both things are possible. So if here I go to graphs, of course I can see all the user path informations for my standard NeoLoad users. But if I want, I can go to the external data. External data will bring me all the details that has been extracted during the test. So here, as you can see, I got a couple of things about the response times, the service response times of the configuration services. So you can see that I'm also getting I'm getting all the information, in fact, related to this the different services used by the applications, but also if you have any nodes behind, you can also get the infrastructure details, the CPU, the memory, the disk activity. So if you want to build your own dashboards there, like a traditional NeoLoad metrics, you can do so. So you can just simply have access to the information in the external data tab that is available in our graph tab, either in the results sections, either also during the runtime sections of NeoLoad.
And it should be easy cheesy. It's not as hot. I mean, I'm actually sweating here. We're in a real kitchen. It's hot here. The ovens are on. So I just had to mention it. Because people are wondering why we're sweating.
All right. So stay tuned. And if you have anything, just drop us questions. We'll be more than happy to help you out.
Yeah.
See you.